It's part of what's being called grey power competition between the US, China and Russia. Singh calls it a developing new Cold War, focused on the developing world.
The United States is intentionally making it a priority to ramp up its efforts to influence public opinion in countries around the world through the lens of seeing these other countries as sort of contested spaces where it needs to combat Chinese or Russian influence.
The research into the increasing US influence in South African media was triggered by a story aimed at discrediting Roscoe Palm, the co-founder of the Pan-African Institute for Socialism.
What we found was that so-called independent media publications were not really as independent all the time as what they make themselves out to be.
Some South African media organizations have received funding from the National Endowment for Democracy. The authors say that according to the NED's financial statements, it's disbursed $1.2 billion in grants in the past decade to NGOs and media organizations globally.
If this was happening by any other country, like Russia and China, certainly in the West, this would be roundly condemned. We just witnessed an entire presidential tenure in the United States largely be consumed by the issue of Russiagate. So if this was happening, it would be widely condemned. When it happens by the United States in the West, it's pretty much ignored and treated as benign and not an issue.
So why is the US intent on influencing sections of the South African media landscape?
Well, we've witnessed over the past decade a sort of rolling back of initiatives or cooperation between the BRIC countries. We've seen this in Brazil with the election of Jair Bolsonaro, an election in which the removal of the Workers' Party government was something that the US was involved in. And we've seen this in India with the election of the far-right Narendra Modi. And this has undermined cooperation of this sort of alternative pole of global influence, for example, BRICS.
The authors are calling for transparency from South African media houses about their funding.
You can't depoliticize an entity like the US government, and you can't depoliticize an entity like the National Endowment for Democracy. So this is something that needs to be talked about.
So we're not about being anti-American agenda or pro-Chinese or pro-Russian. We are pro-African. We are pro-defending our sovereignty from bad actors. And in this climate, the US State Department, the NED, these are bad actors.
The report suggests that people should be aware that there is the soft power influence by major powers in the global south.
Anyone who's paying attention to the global situation can see that things are not very rosy and are getting more and more tense and more dangerous and concerning. And so these sorts of contestations and battles for influence, I think, are going to increase. So we all need to be aware, and that's the first step to being able to do something about it.
I'm Angelo, Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.